Hello and welcome to the garden. It is a glorious day here today and I've got the trowel in my hand because it is time to do some planting out. So I've got two things I really want to get in the ground today. One is Komatsuna. It's the first of the brassicas that I sowed earlier this year to be ready to go out. I've got a variety of brassicas, calabrese, cauliflower, kales and so on, cabbages of course, and they will be ready in, I don't know, a week or two or three, something like that. They're in reasonable sized pots so they can stay there for a little while. The Komatsuna is in perfect condition to plant out right now. It's quite quick growing, that one. Most of the oriental greens actually, they're best grown in the latter half of the year. They crop best through the cooler time. So it's a great one to overwinter, maybe in a greenhouse or a polytunnel or outdoors under some protection. They, generally speaking, they will run to seed from at least from a sowing where they're going to grow through the warmer part of the year. They will run to seed very quickly. You can sometimes get away with a really early sowing of some of them. Komatsuna is one of those that is less bothered by the warmer conditions, and that's why I've started that one. Another one would be Mizuna. That's also less troubled by warmer conditions. But anyway, the Komatsuna, I could have sown that a little earlier actually, but it's not too bad, and the plants will go in now, and it won't be long actually before we can start cropping those. So let me go and grab some and I'll show you what they look like. So these are lovely looking little plants. They are in reasonable sized pots, I think, for a plant this size, and I do like to grow the brassicas on a little bit so that they're a sensible size when I put them out. I feel that way they probably establish quite well, but they're much less likely to be completely wiped out by pests. If you put them out from small cells, which you can do of course, there's every chance then if a marauding slug comes along, instead of leaving you with a few damaged leaves, they can wipe the plant out with the greatest of ease. But anyway, let me knock this one out of the pot with a little bit of care. Come on out. Yeah, there we go. So this is very like compost, so I had to take that out with some care as a habit of falling apart. But you might just be able to make out there's a beautiful network of fine root here. It is by no means pot bound at this stage, but I think in the perfect state for planting out. I must confess that more often than not, I'm on this job a week or two later than I should be, but it looks like I've got to these at just the right time this time. So that is a refreshing change. I'm going to get this in one of the brassica beds in the rotation here. So this had peas and beans in last, and I'll put these next to some early cabbage. At the end there I've got, I think that's Wheeler's Imperial. I've got a few of those in the ground, and I'll get these alongside. That part of the bed then will probably be cleared out fairly early in the season. These will start to crop soon, and the Wheeler's Imperial of course won't be in there for too much longer. So this bed is all ready to go. It was cleared and mulched with lots of horse compost last year. I'm not going to add any extra goodies for these. Very often I'll have a mixture of fish blood and bone, pelleted chicken manure and lime. That's a really handy mixture for the brassicas, and I'll give a handful of that in the planting hole every time I plant out something like a cabbage or cauliflower. But for these little plants I'm not going to do that. That ground is perfectly sufficient, I think, for what these are going to put on. I've had these cabbages covered with this mesh just to keep the pigeons away really, but as soon as I've got these planted I will put some, I'll probably move this butterfly mesh from the other cage there so I can free those up. Now I've got exactly a dozen plants. This is not what I normally do. I usually end up with some spares. I have not thought this through. I think 4 plants across here will do okay. In fact, they'll probably be a little bit close together. If no, I think I'm going to put all 12 in this space. Yeah, they might be a little bit close together, but I can always pull off some of the outer leaves and use those. Yep, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to fit them all in here. So I set these into these pots. When I moved them on, these were started in small cells. I set them into these pots at a reasonable depth, so it's not like I need to sink these down anymore. I think most of them are at the right sort of height, so I don't want to sink them down too much. There, that's just about right. I'll firm that in well. Yeah, these have all got just lovely root systems. It does make a change to be planting out at the right time. Yeah, about there. The weather's good for planting out right now. Not got any extreme cold coming or anything nasty. So next I've got my onions, and although they could stay in these cells for a little bit longer, I'd like to get them in the ground right now. It's a sensible time to be planting them out. The weather is very nice for at least a little while now, so I'm going to get these settled in the ground. I haven't quite decided on the spacing. You could put these anything from, let's say, not closer than 4 inches and not further apart than 6. That would be wasting space. Now, I don't really need great big bulbs. More often than not, they're a bit of a pain in the kitchen. So reasonable sized bulbs, but not whoppers. That would be absolutely fine. Now, my selection here, some of these are better than others. Some of them are singly sown and others are multi-sown. A bit of a mixed bag. I will pick and choose as I'm planting out. I think I've got my trusty plank there marked at various spacings, one of which is 4¼ inches, and I think that's what I'm going to set these out, at least the single cells. For some of those where I've sown more thickly, I might set those out further apart, maybe as much as 6 inches apart, but I'll come to those in a little bit. So these are going in where we had parsnip and carrots, and I took the last of that crop, well, just some days ago, and yeah, the parsnips in particular were absolutely enormous. Never produced such huge parsnips. I did shoot a little bit of footage at the time, which I will play for you right now, and I prepared this bed at that time, so I'll show you that footage now, and when you come back here, I will be planting these up. So I'm preparing this bed for the onions, and our rotation isn't so good here anymore. We've got a 4-year rotation. We've got roots following after the brassicas, of course, and the brassicas following the legumes. That's entirely normal. The 4th year, unfortunately, has to be the onions, which means that they have to follow the roots, and that is not ideal, because by the time we get to the end of the root crop, this soil is in its worst condition and it needs feeding up. So we used to have 12 main beds here, and we ran those on 2 slightly different 6-year rotations, and that worked out much better. I'm afraid I messed that all up because I took 1 extra bed out for more asparagus, and then I took another 2 to drop a polytunnel over. So yeah, I ruined my nice 6-year rotations, and I'm back to a 4-year, and it's really not great for the alliums. So anyway, I'm just preparing this bed, and I thought I'd show you what I'm pulling out, because these are absolutely mad. So in this bed, at this end we had parsnips, and in the other end carrots, and they're reaching the end of their life. They've started to shoot again, and these are still usable. I will probably cut the cores out at this time of year, but they're still firm and they are still good. But I have never grown such ridiculously big parsnips. And just take a look at those 2. They are monsters, and we've got a lot. I mean, that's an ordinary size parsnip, that's not a bad size, but we've got lots of really huge parsnips. I don't always get roots that size. I don't ever get roots this size. That's just crazy. But I mean, that would be a bit of a monster for me normally. But I grew them slightly differently last year. I station sowed those. Normally I do it in a drill and then thin, but I station sowed, and I gave them plenty of space. I would have to check on one of the old videos whether I gave them 6 inches, 7 inches or 8 inches. I can't remember, but it was a good old space, and that has allowed these to produce truly monstrous roots. I've never had anything like that before. I mean, there's an entire meal off 1 parsnip. Anyway, those were so big, I just thought I'd show them on this little bit of footage. This video is not about that. I shall get back to the onions. What I'm doing here, after I've taken these out and cleared the weeds, I shall put over some horse compost, and I'll probably put some fish blood and bone, and then I will give it just a light forking into the top few inches. I'm not going to turn the soil over, but just to mix that in a little bit, because I don't want to be planting my onions straight into the compost layer. But that's an unfortunate consequence of where we are in the rotation. I don't have the time to manure this early in the, let's say early in the winter or late autumn. That would have been ideal, to clear some previous crop out, mulch it, and then it would be in good condition now for planting out the onions. That's what we had in the previous arrangement, but this one I'm going to have to do a little bit more work to get this soil into suitable condition, because, well, the roots don't want a rich soil at all. But the onions, they do like a bit of a feed. If they don't grow well, if they don't get plenty of top growth, you get teeny tiny little onions, and that's not what we're after. So next time you see this will all be prepared and ready to go. So I'm going to start at least at the closer spacing, and the hori hori is pretty much the same width as these cells, or just a little bit more, so it is ideal for planting these. I will set them just a tiny bit deeper, not much. Now this one happens to have a second plant there. I'm just going to pull that out. I don't want it, not with this one. This is a nice specimen there. It's not too pot bound, it's got some long root coming out the bottom, but that's absolutely great. So I can just make a little hole there and drop him in, and that is fine. Just firm it in gently. And this soil here is nice and light. It's been prepared okay, and again, just drop it in the hole and firm it in. Fairly quick job, really. I have to be slightly careful because this compost here is ever so light. It will just fall apart on me. So I've got a mixture of, I think, 3 different varieties. This is Rose de Roscoff, one of my very favourite onions. I've also got some Tropio Rosso, that's a fantastic onion as well. And finally the, what is it, the Florence onion, Rossalunga di Firenze, the long red of Florence. That's also a good onion, but I think if you want anything for eating raw, then, you know, in a salad or something, then the Roscoff or the Tropio onions are probably best for that. They've got a really great flavour for eating fresh. The seedlings are a little bit scrappy this year. I'm not sure why. I had trouble with germination. I had to re-sow some of these, but that's not why these are scrappy. Bad, oh dear, bad gardening, I think. I haven't disturbed any roots there. They're rooting from much lower down, but that's all right. This stuff is just so light. It won't take long for these to get those roots down into the soil, and they should develop fairly quickly here. I'm going to be quite picky over which ones I plant out, at least to start with. I can always put some others in later if I've got plenty of space. I'll just keep them as spares. What now? So that job took a lot longer than expected. There's quite a lot of onions in there. I should have, with a bit of luck, a whole mixture from some half decent sized bulbs all the way down to pickling onions if I'm lucky. If I'm unlucky, I'll just have a bucket full of tiddlers. Something else I need to plant out right now are these little pots of spring onions. So this one is Lisbon. I've got half a dozen pots of Lisbon, and then I have, I think, half a dozen pots of the Florence onion again. Makes a very nice young onion. And actually, you can use almost anything you like for a spring onion. It doesn't really matter. I always get good results with white Lisbon. It's the traditional sort, which of course appeals to me anyway. So this bed is done. I'll give you a quick peek at that, and then it will get covered with mesh like the other. That's mostly to keep the pesky blackbirds away. They will love to come in here and give that all a bit of a tug and make a general mess of the place. So at this end we've got the later sowing. These were all quite thickly sown. These should give us the pickling onions. And then we've got some of the multi-sown sort. They shouldn't be too bad. They should be maybe a good size for roasting whole, something like that. And at this end we've got lots of individual onions. So they're not too bad. Some of the seedlings are a little bit scrappy. I don't know why they're so scrappy looking this year, but they are not the best onion seedlings. But I've been quite selective and only kept the better looking ones. Hopefully now they've got their feet in some decent soil, they will get established quite quickly and grow away happily. They've got a lot of work to do yet. I find this a really convenient way to start off my spring onions. Now, of course, you can, I mean, look, these roots are lovely in there, and they like to grow in a clump like that. It's very successful, but it's very quick and easy to plant them out here. You can start them in drills, of course, or in a seed tray or cells, however you like, but this method is dead handy, and you don't have to break up these clumps at all. They will happily grow there together in a bunch. Now I'm in the border here, so the soil is a little bit heavier. It's not so good, but I'm just at the end of the patch we used for the grey shallots. Yeah, these are great. I do like this way. I could put these probably closer together, but there's no need. And it's so quick and easy to sow them and plant them out this way. A lot less bother, I think. Now I can kick off some more later on in a few weeks' time, although I do get to the point where I start harvesting the overwintered Japanese onions and use those as spring onions, and they're basically ready to use that way right now, so I may or may not start any more. Probably another half a dozen pots maybe. So we have new crops in the ground, of course, that we planted out in the autumn, alliums and broad beans and some spring cabbage, but this is the first time we are planting out this year, and that is great. So I think all of our seed sown onions now, they're all dealt with. It's a bit of a chore, it's quite a lot to plant out in one go, but you only have to do it once a year. So anyway, that is all for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.